Welcome to Perspectives in Peds, or PIP for short, your go-to podcast for insights into paediatric practice. From clinical approaches and emerging research to the everyday wins and challenges, we bring you OT perspectives that inform, inspire and spark conversation.
Welcome back to Pipcast, Mikayla and Caity.
Hello. Thanks for having us.
No worries. We thought today we'd chat about something a little bit abstract, I guess, in a lot of ways. We talk about a lot of clinical topics and goal areas and diagnostic groups, but today we thought we'd zoom out a little bit and chat about clinical reasoning. It's something that we always talk about when we've got students and we've got new grads starting this year, I should say.
Next week.
Yeah, next week. And so much of our focus early on is supporting their clinical reasoning. So I guess to launch us off, does someone want to give us a definition or what we've kind of landed on in terms of what clinical reasoning is?
I will do it.
Okay.
And it's a tricky definition to get right, so I'm actually going to read it because I think we came up with a pretty good definition. But basically it's how we decide what to do next and why that choice makes sense for a client at the time and within a given context as well or situation.
Well put.
Thank you.
Challenge us on that if you want to. We'd love to hear people's definitions of clinical reasoning, but we think that that's a pretty good one. And we often like to refer to our, I guess, little triad, Venn diagram of what best practice looks like. And we also think about what information informs our clinical reasoning. And it's that idea of evidence and client context and our experience and the setting that we're in as well as the client. And best practice is kind of encompassing all of that, but how we deliver that and how we choose how we're delivering that information, I think is kind of what clinical reasoning is. So it kind of wraps all of that up in a nice bow. So it's super complex.
Yeah, and it's so individualized for each different clinician as well. And I guess everyone has a different way of thinking or doing the clinical reasoning component, I guess.
I think if I was to describe it to someone who wasn't an OT or wasn't really familiar with what clinical reasoning is, I think I'd almost just say it's just a justification of what you're doing or being able to explain what you're doing and why, I think is the important part.
Yeah, absolutely. The what, why and the how
Yeah.
I often talk about. And I often kind of think of it as, I guess, your mental sort of workings out within a
I like that.
situation. Yeah. So I don't know if this is a good analogy, but when you have a maths problem and back in school, teachers would be like, you need to write down your workings out so that, if you get the wrong answer, I can see how you got there. And I really like to think of clinical reasoning as that sort of workings out. You're sort of trying to think about what's going on, what your role is and how you're going to approach any sort of situation or goal with your client.
I love that.
I love that too. And I think
Thank
that bank of workings out over time is something that we can't fast track either. And I think when we're talking about clinical reasoning and how we sort of develop it over time, I really like that idea of all those years of practicing and working it out helps you to I guess recognize patterns. So your clinical reasoning over time refines because you get into that habit of if this happens, then this may be what I'm expecting. And it's not if this, then this, because I think that's where I guess early on we can get really stuck on the right answer. So if I see this problem, this is the solution. But over time we know there's multiple solutions and your clinical reasoning is but which one and why is that different for this client over that one?
Yeah, and I think that's why it's so individualized as well because obviously your clinical reasoning is largely shaped by your experiences as well. So it's going to look different for everyone.
So I guess further to that, why does it sometimes feel like certain clinicians get it faster than others?
It's a good question.
I think confidence is a huge one. So I think if someone's really confident to speak to others about their clinical reasoning, that's a huge kind of stepping stone, I guess, in the right direction. And I also think psychological safety in a workplace is also a really big factor as well in terms of someone developing their clinical reasoning maybe a bit faster than someone else too.
I'm going to be a real nerd for the OTs listening. I feel like it's almost PEO.
Yeah.
Because it's like there's the soft skills, like you say, like the circumstances, that how vulnerable you can be, and like those kind of the ability to express yourself well. And then you've got the environmental factors that kind of influence you know, how well you can actually develop those clinical reasoning skills. And then you've got the demands of the task. Like, are you actually set up with, I guess, a workplace that allows you to safely develop your clinical reasoning? Is that really nerdy?
Yeah, like to build on that in terms of like environment, I think as well, like the opportunity that you get to actually do it and who's around you. So I know that we've got like a really experienced team around us who you might think you have an answer to something and then you'll ask for a different perspective and it's just completely different. And also we get time to actually like write out good therapy plans and consider our goals in depth, whereas I know if there's not that opportunity to do it in terms of like having a really big caseload, it's, I guess, punched out really quickly. So I guess considering how much time and thought you might get to put in that might be different as well, which is going to impact it.
Yeah, and I think further to that, it's also that opportunity or time for informal discussion.
Yep.
And I think that's often where a lot of that clinical reasoning develops, because you get to see other people sort of talking about their caseloads or their clients and doing the, you know, the what, the why, the how, and being able to see that really goes a long way in developing your own thinking skills too.
It really does take a lot of vulnerability. I think therapists go through a phase where they almost experience a bit of imposter syndrome, where you think you are expected to know more. So it's really tricky to actually admit gaps in your learning. And I think that we really try to foster a space of lots of reflection where people can actually say, even the seniors, that I really don't know what this is. And we try to acknowledge that clinical reasoning is something that's like never ending. You never actually have perfect clinical reasoning. It's like this abstract thing that you just build over time. And we can't really fast track it either, I don't think. You can provide good environment to help it grow as quickly as possible, but it's not something that you can squeeze into 12 months and you've got it down pat.
I almost think it's like just like learning a new skill or like a motor skill. Like you actually just have to practice to be able to do it. Like you can know what clinical reasoning is and all of that, but unless you actually are doing it, it can be really hard otherwise like not to.
Yeah, it's kind of a mindset really. As well. And you're right, you sort of have to check yourself a bit as well, I guess, as you get more experience, to be like, hey, have I really thought through this scenario too? And is there a different way of thinking about it as well?
I think it really relies on super strong reflective skills as well, not just personal reflections, but actually on your reasoning and why you did things and building that bank and thinking about your workings out, I guess. Yeah. And that clinical reasoning is really like cyclical. It's not, I think sometimes people think the clinical reasoning goes into their therapy plan. It's like figure out what I'm going to do to address those goals. But actually it's more, it's happening in the minutes. It's like a family might respond in a certain way, or a child might give you a certain cue and you may change your activity. You may pull the therapy activity back. You might take a completely different direction. You might question the family on their understanding of something. And all of those micro decisions, I guess, are led by your clinical reasoning, and they happen repeatedly throughout the session and then afterwards.
No wonder we're so exhausted by the end of the week.
It's a nice reminder, isn't it? It's like our job is hard. It's like so much brain power.
Yeah.
So I guess what kinds of things would you suggest to people in terms of – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – fostering an environment that really supports good clinical reasoning?
I like what you said before, Mick. I think time is huge. So like carving out time, particularly for, new grads and things, to make sure they have space to have those informal discussions as well. And I guess when, if you're in an office where there's really high KPIs and things, then there's less of that culture of wanting to have those informal discussions and learning from one another because there's just not time. So I think time is a huge, huge factor.
Formal supervision is not enough.
No.
It's just not, like, especially early on in your career where you're just scrambling to manage your caseload. So it becomes really reactive, and that does change over time. But you're sort of like, what do I do with these 4 clients that I've got coming up next week? So having other space or finding the balance to actually like stop and think and talk things out is also really important, and it should be daily.
And to be able to reflect as well after a session or after something's happened, because that's often, I know for me, that's often where I get a lot of learning. And it's sort of those discussions of, well, this is how I responded or how I approached this situation. This is why I responded in this way. Does anyone else have any thoughts about this? How would someone respond in a different way? And I think that really shapes your clinical reasoning throughout your career as well.
Having a good supervisor is so important for that, I think, because it's so easy to feel attacked, particularly early on, or if you are have been burnt a little bit, or, you've had a rough experience in supervision where you are just questioned on things, or you're more told that you got it wrong, or even worse, that you should have the answer to that.
Yes.
And I think that can be really toxic.
That's a shutdown immediately.
Yeah. The space to get it wrong is really important. I think it's part of learning. It's going to happen. So I think if therapists are worried about getting it wrong, I think that can really impact on the development of clinical reasoning over time.
Which also, like, starting out, I think for me or for others, like, depending on your personality style, like, getting it wrong is also really uncomfortable, and like, you want to know everything. Not everyone, but
no, I'm pretty sure most people.
Like, you want to have the answer. When a family asks you something, you want to be able to respond. And I know, like, early out when people would ask me something and I didn't know the answer, having to have that sort of script of like, I'll get back to you with that, was like really uncomfortable, and you doubt yourself. But I think having things like a shared office space, or where people are often thinking out loud, or even just sometimes speaking, making comments about their sessions, or not even asking questions, just being like, oh, I did this today and it worked really well. No one might respond, but we're all listening to those little conversations that happen throughout the day, which then gives you ideas or different perspectives when then you're going to go and practice, I guess.
Yeah, and I think modelling can be really powerful as well in terms of, like even you were talking about more experienced clinicians, but Jackie, it's the same as like when you sort of say sometimes in the office, like, oh, I actually don't know, or I don't know the answer to that. Oh, that's a hard one. I don't know exactly what I'd do in that situation. Let's talk through it. I think that's super powerful in different workplaces, because then people who are more junior get to see more experienced clinicians be really vulnerable. And I know that's really powerful when I get to see that as well.
What's happening in your head when you're really reasoning well?
Oh, good question. A lot.
Yeah. I think that's the right answer, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, it should feel a bit messy.
Yeah, messy, and you're going back and forth. It's so complicated because you're thinking about so many factors, and you're trying to think about a client really holistically, I guess. So that's a really hard question to answer. What would you say, Mick?
I think I end up with more questions in my mind than when I started. Questions related to the client, questions for myself, even like, is this taking like too long? Like, we've spent a whole session with me just asking you questions and we still don't have the answer yet. But actually, in reality, that is all really helpful information that is going to guide us in the right direction. So yeah, questions, a lot of them.
For me, it's less about maybe what's going on in my head, but it's when I start using the whiteboard a lot.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm like, how do I put this like coherently out of my head actually onto something? And I noticed that like, I'm using the whiteboard and I'm sketching things that I didn't even really know were part of my session plan initially. I think it's trying to, make sense, but also then explain it to the family. That's like another step in itself. Some people have really good clinical reasoning, but really need to foster how they explain that in the moment to families as well.
Yeah, and I think when I'm doing it well, I guess, I'm also enjoying work more. And so that I think that's a really big factor for me as well. It's challenging but enjoyable at the same time. So I feel like I kind of get into a zone, I guess. And I agree. There's lots of questions that come up as well.
It's a really good point. I think sessions that start to feel really repetitive or dry or that your caseload is just the same and you can kind of rock up and do it on autopilot, I think that's like a nice almost like reminder or a flag to shake things up a little bit and question that. Our job shouldn't be easy. So I really like that that's a thing. So is there anything else that kind of gets in the way of developing good clinical reasoning?
Well, I think a lot of it is kind of the opposites of what we've already kind of discussed today. But a big one is obviously the time component. So not having enough time to have that informal supervision or, that dedicated space for your formal supervision as well. And I think another massive one is, like fear of getting the answer wrong or, fear of being vulnerable in spaces or in your workplace, I should say. So I think that's going to be a real barrier for people to be able to develop their clinical reasoning skills.
Do you think too much emphasis on like run-of-the-mill programs too? Like sometimes there's like, they sell like cookie cutter things that you just do in session. And I think that can really inhibit people's ability to.
Yeah, because often therapy is a lot more grey, isn't it? And I know often what a lot of us in here do is we take bits from different, PD that we've been to or different programs and things because obviously clients are so individual. So, I think that could really impede or get in the way as well.
Early on I used to, I don't know if I'm outing myself or if it seems mean, but early on I used to make the therapist go to a school visit with just paper and pens.
Oh my gosh.
And I used to say you can run a whole session literally just with this. And if you can.
That is actually really rough.
We should have an episode on like things that made your graduate year really hard. But I think that the therapists that did that were like, I actually get it. Like you can just rip up paper and make balls and, you can do target practice or you can sketch things or you can, make games out of paper. There's so many things you can do in the space you're in without needing to have fancy books, fancy programs, all of those kinds of things. So, that's probably an extreme example.
I kind of like it though.
Yeah.
I'm also thinking like, I don't know.
Watch out grads next week.
I don't know the word for it. It's perhaps, if you guys know the word, like a synonym almost for like cockiness. Like I feel like sometimes you're a new grad and then you don't know anything and then you feel like you get these things and then you feel like you're on top of the world and you think maybe you know everything. And I think sometimes that can be a barrier as well when you're transitioning to like, oh, actually there is still a lot more to learn. Almost it's like a balance of being like confident but also like open to learning as well.
I think Michelle Bahari uses that like quadrant of stages like of what you should be supported within supervision. And it's that idea of it is the supervisor's role to help you uncover we'll get this right, unconscious incompetence.
Yes.
Which is the bits that you're not aware of that you need to still work on, because I think you go through that stage of when you start anything new that you have that I guess you start in that space and then you start to become a little bit consciously competent and that can kind of take over and you sort of build your confidence a little bit and then you go through conscious incompetence where you're like, oh crap, actually I know what I don't know now and it's a lot. But then we can get overconfident. And it reminds me of another model that I think it's Adam Grant. I think it was in his book, Think Again. It could be one of his other books. I'll check for the show notes. But he has this nice graph that really talks about over time. We're going to butcher this, but the axis that's up on a graph.
Oh no. Y axis?
Is Y up?
Yeah.
Y.
Y is up and X is the horizontal axis. And the horizontal is your competence and the Y axis is your confidence. And over time, you kind of want those to be in balance. And he calls that like confident humility, which is like being aware of what you don't know. But I think early on, novice, when you're first starting as a grad, you're low on both.
Yeah.
And I guess what we want to avoid is having high competence and low confidence, because then you're sort of, experience a lot of imposter syndrome, and that can be really hard to move forward, versus high confidence and low competence, because that's where arguably you're kind of just being a bit irresponsible with your therapy. You're not actually knowing what you're doing. So I think that that's a really good point, Mick. I'll put that little reference to that book in the show notes because it's quite a good one. Not related to OT, but it's an interesting one. So what advice would you give to other clinicians or particularly new grads who are still learning about this kind of term to develop their clinical reasoning? What's your big tip?
I think having some go-to questions in your head already there that you kind of will go to within sessions or after sessions. So thinking things like, if I see this, then it could be this, or then I could do this. So yes, some go-to questions to really develop those thinking skills.
What about you, Mick?
Oh, I might chuck an analogy out here.
Oh,
Love an
please.
analogy. Don't stuff it up.
I think to build on what Caity said in terms of, I guess, if you see this, then you could do that. I think it can sometimes get easy to have like a bank of strategies and be like, yep, I can do this. So considering what you said about having cookie cutter programs, but also considering what Caity said, I guess you could almost think of it a little bit like being a chef or
strap in.
Yeah, or having a recipe. So I
Here we
guess
go.
If you have a recipe and you have all the ingredients there, it's quite easy to follow and that can make you feel really good. And the end product is probably going to be pretty good, right? Whereas I guess if you are the chef making the recipe and know why certain things go together, then you can transfer that to other, I guess, recipes that you'd like to make and know, I guess, why the things in the recipe has worked. So I think
I like that. I'm inclined to think it's like if you have if you're building a recipe for someone who is gluten-free and you stick with the recipe, it may not work. You need to have the knowledge to actually adapt the recipe a little bit.
So I think
that it
like
fits.
for new grads or people even just starting out in pediatrics, if you can kind of put yourself in those shoes and try and move past just these are the strategies and that's what I'm going to recommend, is start to put the pieces together and figure out why, or just think about and like you said, ask the questions around why things go together well and what that end product could look like.
I love that analogy because it's also what we think about, I guess, in a way with our clients too. Like we want them to sort of have a restaurant at home, I guess you could say.
Exactly.
Oh wow, we could just build on this. Yeah.
So we're not constantly giving them a recipe. They're coming up with their own recipes. I love that.
They can
great.
make new recipes at home. That's
That's
exactly
it.
right.
I love that. And I think as well, something else is, be confident or try to be confident, to give things a go, to think out loud with your colleagues, and, it's okay to get it wrong. And it's okay to learn from others and to hear others' thoughts. So I think that vulnerability is really key as well.
And that self-compassion and that vulnerability is a learnt skill in itself. We've done other episodes on that too. So if that's hard for you, it's really important that you do work on that and learn to reflect quite deeply. I think that's really important. Any other, ending notes that you want to give? I think like talking about the complexity of this, I think we can agree that we're not going to be replaced by AI.
Yeah.
Yes.
100%.
Thank gosh.
Exactly. I think that, our role is super complex, and keep refining your clinical reasoning over time, because it's so important, and it's something that we're never going to, I guess, lose as a profession if we keep challenging each other and being open to being challenged. I think that that's probably the biggest thing moving forward.
Yeah, AI can give you the ingredients and maybe a bit of the recipe, but you know.
That was so good. That was great.
I think a takeaway as well, which we haven't, I guess, spoken about yet, is to ask for feedback from the people that you're working with, families, the kids. They know their kids best. So I find that when you open that up from the start, you might think something is working, but if you open that channel, then I guess it's going to keep developing as well, because you can change and adapt your plan.
Love it. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Jack.
See you next time.
Thanks.